yeah, nice.
Okay, can I ask one question on that though?
Yeah.
The occluded fronts, they have the purple signals, but on all the other ones, they kind of have the direction of where it's going. But it seemed like the occluded fronts, they just kind of stay at the same place with purple. How do you know if it's a warm or cold occluded front? Or is that not necessary?
Yeah, so yeah, well, from perspective of knowing what's going on in the air mass, it's definitely necessary. But the occluded front symbol on the chart is going to be the same regardless of what it is.
Okay.
Um, and I know this sounds like probably a poor way to explain it, but when I was learning the weather, I always just kind of thought to myself that occluded front just means nasty weather. Probably not a good way to teach it. You probably should know exactly what a cold and a front, or a cold and a warm occlusion, and the differences. But whenever I was preparing for getting my pilot's license, I just knew stay away from them type thing.
Okay.
But yeah, on the chart, it's going to be that purple triangle and semicircle right next to each other type symbol.
Okay. So you just won't know. Like you just
Yeah.
have to.
Right. Now you can kind of figure it out. Maybe let me see if I have a picture. Let's see. You can kind of figure it out because on the chart you'll see the cold front and the warm front next to each other, and then the occlusion. Let me see if I can. Let's see, occluded. You might be able to figure out by looking at the actual map. Yeah, like for instance, if you've got if you've got this cold front here, and imagine that the area to the left here is cold air mass, and you've got this warm front here, you could pretty much assume that this is a cold occlusion because the cold front's overtaking the warm front.
Uh-huh.
And then if it was flip-flopped, if the warm front was to the left and the cold front to the right, you could I mean, pretty, I guess, obviously you could assume that it is the opposite, like a warm occlusion.
Okay.
And I've always seen it on the map. I don't know if this is, I've always seen cold fronts overtaking warm fronts. I mean, trying to look at some images here to see if there's a better example. Yeah, it is typical. Cold fronts move about 15 to 20 knots faster than warm fronts. So it's not very typical to see a warm front taking over a cold front. In fact, all these images, it looks like cold front's taking over a warm front.
Okay.
Yep.
I've got a couple of other random questions, but I can wait till the end when we typically do the questions, or it just depends on what you want.
Up to you. You can go ahead and shoot.
So you talked about how kind of an airliner language was tree versus 3.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And that's sometimes established, sometimes not. Is niner the same thing when you say 9?
Yeah, niner is the correct way to say the number 9. Yep.
And is that because it could be misinterpreted as a different number, or why? Is it just the same thing of like, why are they saying tree versus 3?
Yeah. Niner, I guess it sounds like other thing. 9 sounds like my or why. Is my guess, but I don't know the exact answer. It's probably because it sounds like something else.
Okay.
Yep.
Another thing, you talked a lot about touch and go landings. Why in the world would you do a touch and go landing? Like if you're just touching down and leaving again, why would you have to land?
Save money. In the military, and I don't know if touch and goes is definitely originated in the military, but large military transport aircraft, when they practice takeoffs and landings, will typically always do touch and goes. And so when you're doing your flying, you'll definitely notice this. Like if you ever go visit, fly around like an Air Force base or something and talk to air traffic control, you'll see like, KC 135 doing touch and goes in the pattern. The reason for this is, large military transport aircraft burn a ton of gas taxiing. And so they can save a lot of gas by just doing a touch and go. And it kind of applies in the general aviation world too. Your airplane is going to be like $100+ an hour to operate. You can save a lot of money by just landing and taking back off immediately rather than landing, taxiing off the runway, taxiing around. If you're at a controlled airport, like the airport I fly out of, if you taxi around, guaranteed 20 minutes wait to take off. And in a Cessna 172 that costs $100 an hour, that can start to add up.
So it's strictly for learning purposes.
Yeah, I mean, I've always done it just to save time and money. I can't think of any real practical reason, like flying fundamental reason that you would want to do it, or the reason they teach it. But it certainly cuts down on cost for sure.
Okay.
Yep. There's also what's called a stop and go landing. Have you guys heard of that?
No.
That's actually safer. It's where you land the airplane and come to a complete stop on the runway, and then take off right from where you're at. A lot of instructors do that just because a touch and go there's a lot going on, right? You got to get the airplane from landing configuration into takeoff configuration while you're doing like 60 miles an hour, and essentially reconfigure the aircraft and get it back in the air. A stop and go lets you stop the airplane so you can focus, get it into takeoff configuration, and then go.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah.
One other one actually there's two other ones.
Just a quick question. I do have a hard stop at 8, so I'm all for the questions, but just ask that we keep.
Sorry, I'll do it in the end.
Okay. Sounds like a plan.
Yeah, I've still got family here. I've still got stuff to do, so if I can.
Yep.
No worries.
Sorry, Chris. I'm not trying to.
Nope.
Gosh, Alan.
I know.
Just kidding.
I feel bad.
All right.
Yeah.
Let's rock and roll. Okay. Weather flight planning. So this is going to build a little bit more on what y'all saw in the video, or what we learned on the weather theory topics. But they're not necessarily too much one and the same. There's a lot of new stuff in this session. So we're going to talk about the tools that you use before you get in the cockpit, while you're in the cockpit. We're also going to touch on a little bit of flight planning. So we'll break out Flight Planner a little bit and talk about that. And then kind of end the session on like, what do we use the tools to do as far as making decisions? Like, am I going to go flying or am I not going to go flying? What you're going to find are the regulations are extremely loose. Depending on how much you fly, you may not be as comfortable utilizing the regulations as your minimum. So you'll hear a term called personal minimums a lot, meaning you define your own set of regulations for when you do and don't go flying based on the weather. So with that, jump right in. I'm just going to start from a real high level and go over a couple different sources of weather information. They are the sources that I use or have used. I'll touch on a couple that I don't use but are out there. When you really get down to it, there's like tons of weather sources out there. I mean, it's endless. There's free weather services, there's paid weather services, there's government-run weather services, there's you name it. So the first one, probably the most important, and the one that you're going to be expected to know how to use for when you get your certificate, is Flight Service Station, FSS. And before the internet, before iPads and all that, this was just about the only source. And even before like cell phones, you pony up to your landline and make a call to flight service. It is a 24/7, 365 government-funded service that is hooked up to the National Weather Service, and they provide aviation-specific weather services. There are a couple standard items that they provide, which we're going to go over later in the charts, but you can literally call flight service and give them your tail number, give them your aircraft registration, and ask them any question that you have about the weather in your area or where you're going. So that is the standard by which all other tools are based off of. Flight service is one of the only quote unquote legal methods to get a weather briefing, and we're going to go over weather briefing here in a minute too. The second one I have on the screen here is probably the second most popular. It's one of my go-to weather sources. That's aviationweather.gov. Have either of you guys heard of this or been to this website?
Negative.
Yep. So it is the same information that you'll get by calling flight service. So this is I don't know if this is the website they necessarily use when you call them up. They may have their own tools, but it's the same exact source data, just on a public website, aviationweather.gov. Next, we have what is called TIBS and HIWAS. I put these on the charts because they are examples of weather sources that are available for pilots. They are extremely, extremely dated sources of weather information. TIBS, Telephone Info Briefing Service, is literally a phone number that you call to get a recorded weather forecast or a recorded current weather briefing. And it's, if you don't own an iPad or a computer or, that kind of stuff, you would use TIBS to get up-to-date weather information about a destination or current weather from your departure airport. HIWAS, similar to TIBS, is pretty much the same thing, but from the air. Say you're flying along and you want to get hazardous weather information, like up-to-the-date hazardous weather information. You look for your nearest VOR station. And if that VOR station has a circular H in its call sign, then you can actually dial up that VOR frequency, in this case 115.5, and listen to a pre-recorded message of hazardous in-flight weather. These two services are available. They are extremely dated, and they are being phased out one by one. So you will be expected to understand them, understand how to use them, but assuming you have more up-to-date technology, probably don't have a reason to use TIBS or HIWAS. And then we've got more in-flight weather. I put the term in-flight weather here because that's what the textbooks call it. But you can actually get this kind of weather on the ground as well. We've got ATIS, Automated Terminal Information Service, which we've kind of learned about before. That's your pre-recorded terminal information messages that air traffic control generates on the hour. And then AWOS and ASOS. I touched on AWOS and ASOS like super briefly, I think, during the air traffic control session. But let's talk about it here. And while I'm talking, I'm simultaneously trying to pull up an AWOS phone number, because you can call these services from your cell phone. AWOS and ASOS are ground weather stations similar to the one pictured on the left. It's a super expensive, fancy weather station that is installed at an airport, and they provide, in most cases, minute-by-minute current weather conditions. So every single minute that goes by, this weather station updates the winds, temperatures, dew point, cloud coverage, and in some cases the density altitude, and we'll repeat that in a recorded message to whoever's tuned in on the frequency. The difference between AWOS and ASOS is the type of weather station that it is. AWOS has less functionality. For example, typically AWOS will only be able to give cloud coverage and visibility to certain values. ASOS has much more capability. In fact, if you listen to an automated ATIS broadcast at like a big airport, for instance, like Houston Hobby, that weather broadcast coming across the ATIS is coming from an ASOS station. So let me pull up, just while I'm talking here, let me go ahead and pull up an ASOS report. I'm gonna put it up to the microphone here. All right. So I've got Granbury Regional, which is an airport up near me. Let's hope this works.
Altimeter 2,996 remarks. Density altitude 2,700.
So here it's going to start again.
14 is right-hand traffic, runway 32. Left-hand traffic, the calm wind runway is 14.
Granbury Municipal Airport. Automated weather observation 2319er. Zulu weather wind 340 at 7. Visibility 10. Clear below 12,000. Temperature 30 Celsius. Dew point 16. Altimeter 2,996 remarks. Density altitude 2,700.
You guys able to hear that okay?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when did they start including the information code? Like, is that just ATIS, or that like information Bravo, right? Like.
Okay. Yes, that is just ATIS.
Okay.
You will only get a an identifier on the ATIS broadcast. Also, ATIS only updates. Typically, I say only, but typically 99% of the time, ATIS only updates every 60 minutes. The AWOS and ASOS, they are automated, and so if you were to continue to listen to that broadcast like we did on the phone, every time that they read through it, it would update continuously. You'd get a minute-by-minute update.
Got it.
Yep. A couple just really quick highlights, and you'll see this when you're reading the text, and you'll learn this when you're doing your flying. But another big difference that I forgot about on AWOS and ASOS, because ASOS is a little bit more capable, it will go ahead and convert and give you wind directions in magnetic headings, which of course is ideal because that's what your compass reads, right? You don't have to do some sort of mental math in your head. AWOS gives you wind direction in true headings. So if you're like flying in California where the difference between true and magnetic is like 15 degrees, you have to be really careful. You have to do a little mental math in your head. Also, if you noticed, what we just listened to was an AWOS report. They only gave us cloud coverage below 12,000 feet. Remember, you heard him say clear below 12,000. ASOS typically has better cloud reporting capability, so it can give cloud heights beyond the 12,000 foot mark. Okay. And then finally, today's most popular version of weather weather information is the electronic flight bag. I've got a screenshot of ForeFlight up here. it's become prolific in the cockpit. Everybody, for less than $1,000, you can pretty much have your iPad in the cockpit with a receiver that can pick up weather information for your ForeFlight or for your electronic flight bag of choice.
Did you choose that city?
I just Googled. This is just something I picked off of Google. Why is this? You familiar with that airport?
Yeah, it was right next to it when I was watching the solar eclipse. That's where I was. I was in Gerardo, Missouri.
Get out of here. Hey, that's a small world, man.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. This I don't think this is the weather that you were experiencing, though, because it said that sometime on the 15th day of the month between 20 and 21 Zulu, you were getting major thunderstorms. I don't think that's what you were getting, were you?
There actually were thunderstorms in the area. But
really?
Yeah.
Okay.
So probably not us, but anyway, I thought that was very coincidental.
That's crazy, man. Wow. Okay, so that's a electronic flight bag. And like I said before, there's a ton of places you can get this information. It's almost too many. You have to really become comfortable with one or two that you really like, and just go for it. The reason I like Aviation Weather Center is because it's the same source data that flight service uses. I know that by calling flight service or looking at aviationweathercenter.gov, I can get the same type of information. If something confuses me on the website, I can always call them and ask for clarification. So, real quick, we're gonna just look at this eye chart. We've looked at this before. This is something that we're all gonna have to commit to memory. I have not figured out a real good way to commit this to memory. It's a very difficult chart to remember, but these are the VFR weather minimums for each class of airspace. The FAA defines for each class an absolute minimum cloud clearance and visibility that you must have to conduct VFR, visual flight rules type flying. And it's black or white. If your weather is below these values, you can't fly unless you're on an instrument flight plan. If your weather is better than these values, you can conduct VFR flight. But like I said before, you'll notice these weather minimums are quite they're very minimum, and a lot of pilots that fly, a lot of private pilots, these aren't good minimums from a personal standpoint. But we're gonna go through them, and you're gonna have to commit them to memory because you're gonna be asked about them during your training. So let's go from top to bottom. We'll talk a little bit about each one, and I don't expect you guys to commit this to memory after looking at this chart. It's definitely something you got to stare at for days. But so class alpha, you guys remember what class alpha is?
Sorry, I was on mute. Above 60,000?
Almost.
600?
Almost. A little bit lower.
600?
A little bit lower.
All right, hit me with it. I can't remember.
So the ceiling is 60,000.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, starts at 18,000.
That's right. Okay.
That's right. Yep. And here's another. Try to get this one. So why don't you think there's any weather minimums for Class A?
Because the air's too thin for the weather to. No, that's not right.
Because you
have to be IFR. So
you have to be IFR. Yeah, you can't be VFR in Class A. You got to be on instrument flight plans. So the weather minimums don't apply. Class Bravo, these are your major airports: Houston, Hobby, IAH, DFW, etc. 3 miles visibility, and the term statute simply means that's ground visibility. That's visibility on the ground. So 3 statute miles visibility, and you must be clear of clouds. So you can be flying 5 feet away from a cloud, but you cannot be in it. That's very, very restricted. 3 miles visibility, clear clouds is basically instrument flying. Class Charlie and Class Delta have the same weather minimums. They are 3 mile visibility, and then you've got some cloud clearance requirements here. You must be 500 feet below, 1,000 feet above, 2,000 feet horizontal cloud clearance. These are, I should say, these are ands. So you must be and. It's not like you can't just meet one of them. You must meet all of them. So if this is your cloud, you've got to be, you have to be 500 feet, at least 500 feet below it. You have to be at least 1,000 feet above the next cloud layer below you. So if there's a cloud right here, you got to be at least 1,000 feet above that one. And then within any horizontal distance, in either direction, you have to be 2,000 feet away. Class E. You guys remember what Class E is? This is usually the toughest airspace to remember.
It's everywhere. It's typically 1,200 to 10,000, not including, or it could be 700 depending upon the magenta fade.
That's right. Yep. And so Class E does have its own weather minimums. If you're in Class Echo below 10,000 feet above sea level, then you've got the same weather minimums as your Class C and Class D. You can see it shares the same weather minimums. If you're in Class E above 10,000 feet, so if you're, if it's a Class Echo that goes up to 14,500 maybe, or maybe it goes all the way up to 18,000, then you've got a little bit, looser, looser requirements, 5 miles, or I'm sorry, tighter, 5 miles, and the cloud clearance gets a little bit further. This is because they kind of assume that if you're flying above 10,000 feet, you're probably flying a high-performance airplane, so you need a little bit more time to react to visual cues, traffic, etc. And then you got Class Golf. You guys remember what Class Golf is? Yeah, it's your uncontrolled airports, uncontrolled airspace all the way around. This is where it starts getting stupid confusing. You've got AGL difference. You've got altitude differences. You've got day and night differences. This will drive you nuts. And for like after you get your certificate and you're flying, and you kind of start to forget about these minimums because you set your own personal minimums, right? You have to remember this chart all over again when you go for your flight review. So yeah, day requirements. Typically, I try to remember that Class G during the day you've got a 1 mile visibility requirement, and at night it jumps up to 3. And then the altitude requirement difference, the 1,200 feet AGL versus below versus above, always gives you the cloud clearance difference here. And then what I always try to remember is Class Golf and Class Echo above 10,000 foot MSL has the same cloud clearance requirements. So try to remember that as kind of just a memory item. So yeah, this chart, I'll check in with you guys several years from now and make sure this chart's still driving you nuts. It really does. But it's good to remember because if you're operating at a Class Delta airport, like let's say Sugar Land, right? That's Class Delta. They use this chart to determine whether the field is IFR or not. And for a controlled airport, they are very strict. If you depart in VFR and then the weather turns sour and you come back to finish your flight, your training flight or whatever, and all of a sudden the weather's now 2 miles visibility, or maybe it's maybe the visibility is fine, but the ceiling went down to 800 feet. Well, the tower's going to say, November 1, 2, 3, 4, the field is IFR, state your intentions. And then if you're not IFR qualified, you're going to have to find somewhere else to go. So, they use this chart to determine whether or not, you can actually operate at the field or not. So that's weather minimums. When you start your flying, you're going to start coming up kind of with your own minimums. You're going to say, well, I'm really only comfortable down to like 5 miles visibility, or, maybe I don't want to fly if the clouds are below 1,500 feet, even though that might be VFR. You'll have your own set of minimums you feel comfortable with. All right, so we've talked weather sources. I'm going to dive into the actual weather reports subject matter. I'm going to start with the weather reports that give us our current weather. And there are a couple tools that will give us current weather reports. Then I'm going to jump over and we're going to talk about tools that give us weather forecasts. So, weather several hours from now. And then we're going to talk a little bit about in-flight weather tools. So I'm going to go in that order: current weather, forecast, and then in-flight. The first most popular weather tool that you're going to learn how to use to decipher current weather at a reporting location is called the METAR. And METAR is an acronym for Aviation Routine Weather Report. It's the only acronym I know that doesn't have the same letters in it as the description. So METAR is...
There's not even an M in there.
There's not even an M. No, So, yeah. So Aviation Routine Weather Report, it's an observation of current station weather. And I would say probably on the order of 50 or 60% of your airports out there have METAR capability. If your airport has an ASOS, and it's an automated ASOS, then it will typically also have a METAR, because the ASOS feeds the METAR. Issued every 60 minutes typically. And we're going to go through the ingredients of a METAR. So first off, the first thing you'll always see in your METAR is your identifier. So in this case, I've got Sugar Land Regional Airport up here on the screen. And then it's going to give you the date and time in calendar days and Zulu time. You guys, I remember several sessions ago, I mentioned that once you start getting in aviation, Zulu time kind of rules. And so I took this report on the 24th day of the month. That's what the 24 stands for. And the time of the report was 23:53 Zulu. So for Texas time, 22, 21, 20, 19, 18. So it was 18:53 local time, or 6:53, almost 7 o'clock. So almost 7 p.m. on the 24th day of the month. The winds at the time of the report were 100 degrees, or out of direction 100 at 9 knots. So the first 3 digits of your wind report are going to be the magnetic direction of the wind, and then the speed in knots. Sometimes you'll see in your wind report, after the KT, you'll see a G and then some numbers. And that means that the winds actually, during the reporting period, or during the 60-minute reporting period, the winds actually gusted to a certain value. So you might see like 1009 and then G22, meaning at some point during that reporting period, there was a wind gust at 22 knots. Visibilities next in statute miles. So this particular one's 10 statute miles. Some weather reporting stations only have the capability to give you ground visibility up to 6 miles. And so sometimes you'll see, instead of like 10 statute miles, you'll see a P, a 6, and an M. And what that stands for is plus 6 miles. It means that the ground station detected that it was beyond its capability. So it's most likely visibility better than 6 miles. Next up is sky condition. So this was probably a really bad example because at the time I took this report, Sugar Land was reporting clear, CLR, no clouds. And then temperature dew point spread. So 3123, this is in centigrade. So 31 degrees Celsius, 23 degrees Celsius dew point. Just to check up on our last session, you guys, what do you think the importance is of having your temperature dew point spread here?
Understand whether or not it's going to rain or you'll get weather conditions.
Yeah? What kind of weather conditions?
Clouds.
Yes. If you've got a real close temperature dew point spread, like if that was 31 degrees Celsius dew point, you probably have fog because that's an indication that the air is condensing or the moisture is condensing at that particular reporting station. Barometric pressure is next, and it's given, you know, in the altimeter with the altimeter moniker. So like we heard on that AWASH report, you know, altimeter 2979. So that's your barometric pressure at the time of the report. And then comes the fun part, because you get really good at reading METARs, you know, your identifier, your time, your winds, so on and so forth. And then you've got this section called remarks. And I don't know if you guys have dove into, you know, METAR reports at all, but there can be just a ton of different remarks. Some of them you become really good at memorizing, like for instance, A02. Just means that it's an automated reporting station. There's not like a human being coming up with this report. It's automated. And then like SLP stands for sea level pressure in millibars. So like, you know, 29 inches mercury converts to 88 millibars if you want to, you know. And then, you know, this has another meaning which I vaguely remember, and this has another meaning which I vaguely remember. So the remarks section, you can, what I'll say is you can Google because there's a ton of different codes that the METAR can give you. I'm going to take a stab at the 6. I think what the 6 means is that rain began at 12 minutes past the hour. I'm just going to take a stab at that, and we'll see if that's right later. So you can get a bunch of different remarks in this section. Yeah, go ahead.
What do you have to, I mean, is it just everything up to the remark that you need to be comfortable with for the exams?
Yeah, I would. Listen, your FAA examiner is going to be an extremely cruel person if he makes you memorize remarks. Let me just to give you a flavor. Let's go here. So
there's over I think 100 or something.
Oh, it's unbelievable. So, so here's, I won't get too carried away, but here's just a snippet. This doesn't even cover everything, but you can see, you know, you can see what can show up in your remarks. I got that. Looks like I got that 6 one wrong.
No, you're right. The 6-hour precipitation amount.
Oh, yeah, you're right. Where's it at? Where?
It's up. Just had it right there.
Okay, there we go. Yeah. So, I mean, you know, here's the truth of the matter. The examiner wants to see you pass. He's not gonna ask you for, hey, what's the snow depth on the ground? I really doubt that. Now, check with your instructor. Maybe he has a different opinion. But when I took my exam, I do remember being asked about the sea level pressure. I was asked about that, and I was asked about the automatic one. And I'll be honest with you, those show up in every single METAR. Every single one. head over to aviationweather.gov and take a look at the METAR, just see if we can see something different here. So let's get down here, head down to where you guys are at. What's Sugarland reporting now? I'm sorry, that's like really small on the screen.
Got it.
Got it. Okay. So looking pretty decent, not too terrible, but you can see there's your remarks, right? The automatic station remark there, and then the sea level pressure of, I guess that's maybe 11.9 millibars.
You have a different weather condition code there too. For overcast, that was that 6,000 feet?
6,000 feet, and keep in mind, this is something that tends to get forgotten a lot. The altitudes in the METAR reports are in above ground reference. So that is 6,000 feet above the airport surface, which of course is going to be different than your altimeter. Your altimeter is going to give you above sea level. So the clouds, when you're flying through Sugarland, are going to be at like 6,400 or whatever. You know, you got to add sea level altitude, field elevation to that value.
So it's 6,000 plus the field level of the altitude of the airport. Okay.
Yep. Yeah. So just to visual it.
So that's 6,000 is AGL, not MSL?
AGL, you got it. So so the weather report said overcast at 6,000 feet. So what that means, here's my weather reporting station on the airport grounds. It's detecting a cloud layer at 6,000 feet above the ground. But because the ground happens to be, and I'm guessing here, I want to say Sugarland's probably like 400 feet
no.
above. So here's sea level, right?
It's probably like 60.
It's, what is it, 560?
No, more like it's probably between 40 and 80.
Okay, so let's call it 60. So because the airport ground is, call it 60 feet above sea level, then when you're flying your airplane and you're like right here at this cloud base, your altimeter, which is referenced to sea level, is going to show 6,060, right? Just have to remember to do that conversion in your head when you're getting a weather report, because all the weather reports are in AGL. Makes sense? Chris, does that make sense?
I think so.
Yeah. I'll do a more, let's do a more extreme example. Here is, let's go over to Colorado. So we're going to go to whatever this airport is right here. Looks like it's in the mountains. Of course, no clouds. Here we go. So here's a weather report at MLF, wherever that is. And it says that I've got few clouds at 6,000 feet. Few 060. Now, this airport, MLF, let's just go look it up. This airport is 5,000 feet field elevation. 5,042 feet field elevation. So, so if I'm at this airport, MLF, here's the airport grounds. Here's the weather reporting station, okay? And the weather report said few at 6,000 feet. So what that weather reporting station says is I've got few clouds up here, and they are at 6,000 feet AGL. Or if you want to think about it, above the weather station, right? Right, directly above the weather station, 6,000 feet. Now, your altimeter is calibrated to sea level pressure, and we already know that the airport ground is 5,042 feet above sea level, right there. And because your altimeter is calibrated to that, your altimeter is going to show 5,042 feet when you're sitting on the runway. Now, when you're flying your airplane and you're up at altitude, and you're going to want to kind of have a feel for where that cloud level is, you call into the ASOS that's providing this METAR, and it says you got few clouds at 6,000 feet. Well, you're not going to find those clouds at 6,000 feet on your altimeter, because your altimeter is based on, here's your altimeter right here, is based on sea level pressure at 0 feet sea level pressure. So you're going to have to add the field elevation to that weather report to get your actual altimeter altitude for those clouds. So, you know, rough math, 10,000 feet or so. Your altimeter is going to be showing about 10,000 feet, 10,042 feet if you want to get exact, where you're going to see that cloud level above sea level.
Got it.
Cool. All right, that's the METAR. Issued every 60 minutes. And if you can get an ASOS report from an airport, you can typically get a METAR, because they are the ASOS provides the METAR. Just a quick glance at some codes that you'll want to get familiar with for METAR. In the weather phenomenon space, you're going to see a bunch of these a lot. I mean, you're not going to really run into volcanic ash too much in Texas, but you will, you know, you'll run into dust, sand whirls. I've seen that. Fog actually happens quite a bit down your guys' way. Austin gets a lot of fog in the middle of the summertime. Rain, you'll see rain a lot, drizzle. So you'll see these descriptors in the weather phenomenon area, the METAR. And then here's a good. I don't think I really touched on this during the weather theory session, but we did talk about cloud families. The weather people have a language they use when they talk about how dense the clouds are in the sky, or how much space they take up, cloud coverage, if you will. And it's you know, fractional. So if the weather person or if the weather station senses that there's like the sky is 1/8 or less covered with clouds, that's when you'll get your clear. 1/8 to 1/4, few, so on and so forth. You know, so clear is clear, few is, you know, a cloud every, you know, 30 square miles or so. Scattered is you know, a little bit more densely packed in. Broken is almost damn near overcast. You know, if it weren't for a few breaks in the clouds, it would be overcast. And then overcast is completely covered, like complete ceiling, cannot see the blue sky. So you guys will get comfortable with this language when you look at your weather reports. And if you start to use Aviation Weather Center, the little METAR symbols will give you some cloud coverage. Like, for instance, you know, this totally green symbol should be, I think, overcast. Yeah, overcast. And then as the symbol gets less and less full, it becomes like scattered, like the 3/4 symbol, scattered. Yeah. All the way down to clear, like this open green symbol is like clear. Yeah. Give you a visual feel for cloud coverage. All right, that's METAR. Any questions on the METAR, the Aviation Routine Weather Report?
What was the blue circle on that map?
You know, that might be like fog. Let's see. That's a good question. maybe, you know what? It's probably an indication of the flight condition. So let's look here. Yeah, there we go. So officially, from a regulation standpoint, you're only really going to run into VFR and IFR flying. So VFR visual flight rules, IFR instrument flight rules, and those are based on the VFR weather minimums that we looked at in that table earlier. Some weather products, and well, nowadays most weather products will also stick in what's called marginal VFR, MVFR, and low IFR, LIFR, to add another element of the flight category. You know, VFR and IFR are known as flight categories. VFR has its weather minimums. Marginal VFR means that you're getting close to the weather minimums. And so let's see if this is a good example here. Yeah, so overcast 3000. So that's, you know, for that particular airport, if that's a Class Delta airport, the ceiling requirement for Class Delta, if you remember the chart, is 1,000 feet. And this is getting close to that, 3,000 feet. So it's marginal VFR. It's still legal. You can still go flying, but it's marginal. And then let's see here. See if I can find a low IFR. Low IFR is tough to find in the summertime. But, you know, let's pick out an IFR one if I can. Oh, here's a low IFR right here. So, so you can see this particular METAR report. We've got our identifier. We've got our date and time, 31st day, 2335 Zulu. This auto means it's an automatic auto-generated report, which you can also see by looking at that A01 at the end. There's your wind condition with your gust. Winds at 040, so out of the northeast. 15 knots, gusting 29. And then here's your low, the reason for the low IFR for the pink symbol. 3/4 statute miles visibility. In mist, BR is mist, and overcast at 400 feet. So in terms of instrument flying, this is extremely low. 400 feet and 3/4 statute miles. Potentially, depending on the instrument flight rules on the that the airport has for their approaches, it may even shut down the airport. So whenever you see a low IFR, and on this particular weather product, it's denoted with a pink symbol. But whenever you see the low IFR, if you're instrument rated, it might even be below instrument minimums.
And it also said 2121, so you probably have a lot of clouds, right?
Oh, yeah. Hey, that's awesome. You saw that. Where was that? Was that Lexington? Where'd it go? Yeah, there it is. Yeah. Well, so hey, that's like, Chris, that is an excellent way to connect the theory, right? So your temperature's 21 Celsius, your dew point's 21, and to the point that you just made, if the temperature and the dew point are the same, your moisture content in the air is condensing at that particular reporting station, at that temperature, at that reporting station. So what are you going to have? You're going to have fog, and that's exactly what you have at this particular airport. 3/4 mile visibility, fog. Nice, man. High five, Chris. That was awesome. Depending on which weather product you decide to start using, I mean, you'll get very good at using the graphic weather products. I personally really just like to use the text version. You know, after a while, you become pretty good at reading the text. But the graphic is nice to see the weather or the wind directions. You know, in general, the wind's out of the north up by where I'm at. It's out of the northwest where you guys are at right now. So on and so forth. So, and then this particular tool lets you download the METAR in text format if that's all you want. So there's the current METAR at Sugarland. All right. So that's METAR. The next weather tool in our toolkit for determining current weather conditions is what's called a PIREP. And a PIREP is short for a pilot report. The official regulatory term is aircraft report, but they're one and the same. You'll never use the term aircraft report. You will always use the term PIREP. And in fact, the term PIREP's abused left and right for other non-weather things too, like hey, Chris, you flew the new Cessna 182 last week. Can you give me a PIREP on that? It just stands for like pilot report. From a weather perspective, though, this is probably one of the most like valuable weather reporting tools we've got, and it is essentially a human beings report on the current weather conditions at a point in time in the sky. It's not a ground report, although I suppose it could be, but 9 times out of 10, it's going to be a report at altitude from the cockpit from an actual pilot. They are essentially issued like on the spot, and they'll have a expiration period depending on what kind of weather report it is. Typically 2 hours they'll expire, but I've seen certain weather reports for significant items like hurricanes that'll stick around for longer than 2 hours, and they're extremely simple to file. And I'll kind of go through an example of how to file one here in a second. They use similar codes and terminology as METAR, but they're not totally one and the same. They do start with the identifier. So this particular one that I cherry picked was the identifier was Pittsburgh International Airport.
Why don't IREPs use the K prefix on the airport code?
Man, that's a really good question. I don't know.
Okay.
You know, the K in front of the airport code is ICAO. You guys ever hear that term? ICAO, ICAO.
Mm-mm.
So ICAO is the universally accepted. It's like the United Nations for aviation. It's the internationally, globally accepted standards by which aviation participates in. There's you've got FAA regulations, and then you've got ICAO recognized regulations. A lot of the transcontinental airspace is governed by ICAO regulations. Anyway, where I'm going with that is the K, the kilo prefix in front of the airport, is an ICAO recognized practice. So domestically speaking, you don't typically use the K. For example, if I'm flying to Houston Hobby from my airport here in Dallas, and I want to request flight following, VFR flight following, I don't when I request flight following, I don't tell the air traffic controller that I'm going to Kilo Hotel Oscar uniform. I just say I'm going to Hotel Oscar uniform. So typically in practice, when you're flying domestically, you're not going to be using the K a lot. But you're right, it's in the METAR, which is interesting. I don't know the answer to that question. I'll have to look it up. Anyway, so PIREPs. So identifier, Pittsburgh. And then you've got the type of report that it is. And the UA report is like a typical report or a routine. It's a routine report. If you see the WA, or I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said W. It's UUA, then it's an urgent report. And this typically what I use this for is, like, as I'm scanning PIREPs, if I see a UUA, it like catches my eye and I know that it's like an urgent report. It probably has like major turbulence, major convective activity, major icing, something that I'm going to want to pay attention to. Wind shear reports are typically in a urgent PIREP. But this one is a routine. This one's an easy one. This is just a routine report. The next is the location call out. And 9 times out of 10, the location is going to be a radial off a fix. So, for example, this particular report is OV, which stands for over MMJ VOR on the 180 radial, 30 nautical miles from the station. So I'm looking at a map, and here's my VOR station. It's a really crappy looking VOR. Here's your VOR station with your compass rose, right? The 180 radial. This particular aircraft was 30 nautical miles from the station on the 180 radial. Make sense?
So due south. Yeah, cool.
What's that?
Oh no, I pulled it up on ForeFlight as well.
Okay. Yep. What tends to get a little confusing, and this kind of goes back to the discussion about whether you put the K in there or not. They'll also put airport codes in here. So MMJ, I blindly guessed that was a VOR, but it could be an airport as well.
It's a VOR.
Okay.
Just outside of the Pittsburgh airport.
There we go. Okay, cool. Consequently, you should be semi-prepared to tell the air traffic control or flight service person kind of where you're at when you give your report. If it's air traffic control, they'll be able to plot you based on radar. If it's flight service, they will not. You'll have to actually tell them where you're at. The time in Zulu, so 2352 Zulu. The altitude in terms of flight level, so this is 16,000 feet, flight level 160. The type of aircraft you're flying, so in this case, this is a Canadair Regional Jet 700 series. And then the final portion of the PIREP is just a bunch of code words for what type of weather you are trying to communicate. And in this particular case, continuous turbulence, light, and occasional moderate chop. So this particular pilot was saying, hey, I've got this like continuous light turbulence, so there's like continuous bumpiness, and then occasionally there will be some chop, meaning like, you'll hit a big bump and you'll get some chop, what's called chop. PIREP, you're also going to be able to see under aircraft reports here on your aviationweather.gov. And nothing really for the Texas area. Looks like we're getting some pretty good weather here in Texas, but let's maybe head up this way. And all right, what we got here? Oops, shit. All right, so we got BNA Airport. I'm not too familiar with where that's at. It's a routine report. It's over BNA Airport, or maybe BNA is a VOR. 015 radial, 9 nautical miles. Time 2240 Zulu. And so in this particular report, this code means it was FLD URGC means it was filed during climb. type is Boeing 717. And this particular report, this pilot just wanted to let everybody know that the skies are scattered at 2,800 and the tops are unknown. So he did not have a report for the tops of the clouds. Let's look at one that might be a little bit more exciting here. Maybe like, so just a couple notes on PIREPs real quick. You'll see a lot of PIREPs where pilots will want to report cloud ceilings and cloud tops, notably cloud tops. Reason for that is there's no weather reporting tool out there that can help you identify where cloud tops are, like known to man. There's like no tool out there that can definitively tell you, oh, the cloud tops are at 10,000 feet. So a lot of times pilots will provide pilot reports to let their fellow pilots know, hey, you know, I just climbed through the clouds and the cloud tops are at 8,000 feet. Just want to let everybody know that, you know. Or they can be used to negate a weather report. So, you know, for St. Louis, I pulled up this PIREP around St. Louis. Maybe there's like a, you know, an AirMet or a SIGMET out there for turbulence. Well, this Learjet 35 pilot wanted to let everybody know that, hey, even though there's a weather advisory out there for turbulence, my report is turbulence negligible, mostly smooth. And he was at flight level 400, 40,000 feet. So this is just a really good way for pilots to communicate actual weather conditions as they're experiencing them in the air.
How do you report PIREPs? Is it through air traffic control?
Yeah,
that's a good question.
Yeah, two different ways. Air traffic control will take them. They'll gladly take them. They are not required to file them. They only file them if they have the time to do so. Now, my experience, 99% of the time, they will file them because it's in everybody's best interest. Flight service, FSS, flight service station, which we talked about at the start of the session. They will take them and they are required to file them. So if you're flying along and you decide that you want to file a PIREP and you want 100% guarantee it's going to get filed and broadcast, you would tune into the closest flight service frequency and file your PIREP. Air traffic control will gladly take it, and they will 99.9% of the time file it, in my experience. Oh, by the way, they don't need as much information either. So just as an example, I can tell you probably exactly what happened with this Pittsburgh one. This CRJ pilot was flying. He was climbing through flight level 160. And as he was, you know, transitioned from one frequency to the next, you know, maybe he got handed off to center frequency. Upon calling in, he just says, "Hey, you know, center, you know, Indianapolis Center. This is CRJ November 1234, flight level 160, experiencing light turbulence and occasional chop." And that's all that air traffic controller needs to file this PIREP, because he's got the altitude, he by default has the time, and because he's got radar, he by default has the location. So that's how air traffic control will file PIREP. Make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. Flight service is going to need more information because flight service doesn't have radar. They're going to need to know like exactly where you are. They obviously they know what the time is. They're going to need to know your altitude, and then they're going to need your report. So air traffic control, very simple. The next tool in our toolkit for current weather is radar and satellite. These are probably more or less self-explanatory. You guys probably have been using radar and satellite outside of aviation purposes.
We also just lived that.
You also, yeah, no, for sure. My gosh, that's right. Hey, and what do you know? There's Harvey right there. You can probably tell what day I took these snapshots. Radar is a return of physical moisture in the air, or if you want to call it as such, precipitation. Right? It's a physical return of precipitation in the space that the radar is covering. So the radar signal goes out, and whatever it hits, in the case of weather radar, precipitation, actual physical moisture, it returns in a colorful array depending on the density of the moisture that it hits. And satellite is a visual picture. Simply, it really truly is simply a camera on a satellite taking a high resolution image of what it sees below on Earth, above Earth's surface. So radar, you're going to see your precipitation. Satellite, you're going to be able to see clouds. Probably won't use satellite too much, but you might. Radar, you're going to get to know radar very well, because general aviation aircraft, we got to stay away from the reds and the yellows. The greens, the blues and the greens are okay, but the reds and the yellows are stay clear. All right, so that's current weather tools. That's what I've got laid out for current weather, and on our Aviation Weather Center, current weather is just really easy to get to. You've got current weather under the observations header right down here. Got your aircraft reports, your METARs, ceiling and visibility we didn't really talk about, but those are some additional tools you can use that are based on METAR data. And then you've got your radar and your satellite. All right, let's dive into forecasting. Forecasting is more fun because you can see what the forecast is and see if it's accurate. The first thing that we're going to talk about with forecasting is is METAR's counterpart, which is called the TAF, the Terminal Aerodrome Forecast, or Terminal Airport Forecast, if you want to call it that. It is a 5-mile radius forecast around a reporting station, which is your airport. Your TAF is generated every day, 4 times a day on the midnight hour, and then every 6 hours thereafter per Zulu time. And what you're going to find is your TAF, the text version, is almost identical from a code perspective as your METAR. So the good news is you're not going to have to like memorize 2 different weather reporting languages. But I'd say the one difference is the TAF is usually a lot longer because it has to cover more time sequences, right? It's got to cover various different weather phenomenons as they occur throughout the day. So let's go through this one as an example. This is a TAF from Sugarland that I pulled on the 24th of the month, which, as you can see, there's the same type of coding as your METAR. The report is generated on 24th of the month at 23:23 Zulu. And the report is valid on the 25th of the month between 0 and 24 Zulu. weather reporting perspective, if you're going to use this report, only really use it between the validity times. 25th day of the month, between 0 and 24 Zulu. And then for this reporting period, which is a very, very long reporting period, this is a full 24 hours. Here's your weather. You've got your wind, your visibility, your weather phenomenon, and your cloud coverage. So, in general, period on the 25th day of the month, you're going to have winds out of 130 at 7 knots, plus 6 statute miles visibility, vicinity rain showers, VCSH stands for vicinity rain showers, and scattered clouds at 4,000 feet. That's your general weather forecast for that period. Now, along with that, the National Weather Service issues a whole host of weather forecasting times during the period. And we're going to go through that here right now. So, the next line down, it's a little bit of repeat information, but bear with me here. Within this particular reporting period of 0 to 24 Zulu, we've got an update to the weather forecast. From, FM stands for from, the 25th day of the month, 300 Zulu, 0 report is valid from this period. So from 300 Zulu on the 20 going forward, this weather, you know, instantly you're thinking to yourself, all right, this particular weather report up here was only good for like 3 hours. And so from your 300 Zulu period on forward, you can expect these wind conditions, this visibility, and this cloud coverage. Now, important to note that you don't see any sort of weather phenomenon. That's because during this weather reporting period from 300 Zulu, there's no weather phenomenon expected. Just a cloud report here.
Hey, Adam.
Yeah.
You were breaking up just a little bit.
Testing.
No, you're fine. I caught most of it, but what I missed was how you identify the range of time that particular line is valid. Could you just briefly circle back on that one?
Yep. So the basic answer is there is no range on this particular line, but on the next line down, there's another from report.
Ah, okay.
So what you can basically conclude, if you will, is the range is 300 to 900 Zulu.
So could you say that the prior line is saying that it's from 00 to 300?
Yeah, right on. That's exactly right. Mm-hmm.
Okay, that makes sense. Cool.
Yeah, that does make more sense. But in reality, it's really valid through the whole reporting period. So you have to kind of be careful.
No, I completely get that.
Mm-hmm, yeah. So next line down, the next from line. So from the 25th day of the month, 900 Zulu, you can expect this weather. Wind 050, 14 knots, 6 miles visibility. There's that vicinity showers, and then scattered 2,000, broken 12,000. Yet again, we've got another change in the weather forecast from 25th day of the month, 1,500 Zulu, change in the wind, visibility stays the same, Now we've got a different weather phenomenon, vicinity thunderstorms. And the best way to characterize the term vicinity, that's the same as isolated. So when you hear the term isolated on the news weather, vicinity, isolated, similar terms, right? It's not total coverage, but thunderstorms are in the vicinity.
Does that also, when you say isolated, does that also mean non-frontal?
Not always.
Okay.
Isolated is more of a coverage qualifier.
Okay.
Yep.
Got it.
Okay, and then we've got another code here. I'm actually really happy that, because you never ever see this code, hardly ever see this code right here in a TAF. It's very rare. But the next code, the next line down, follow me here, means 30% probability between these reporting times. Hopefully you're noticing a theme. Between 1500 Zulu and 1900 Zulu on the 25th day of the month, there's a 30% chance, 30% probability of thunderstorms and rain with broken clouds, broken cumulonimbus clouds at 2,500 feet ceiling. So that's a lot to digest. Let me do that again. Between reporting periods 1500 and 1900 Zulu on the 25th day of the month, so the same day, there is a 30% chance, a 30% probability of thunderstorms and rain. And there will be broken cumulonimbus clouds at 2,500 feet AGL ceiling. If you guys remember from the theory class, cumulonimbus clouds are those huge, towering thunderstorm clouds that go from, in this case, 2,500 feet all the way up through, 30,000+ feet. From a coverage perspective, TS, thunderstorms, is more coverage than vicinity thunderstorms. TS is not isolated. TS is high thunderstorm coverage.
Adam, what was the VCSH again?
That is vicinity showers.
Okay.
So that is rain showers in the vicinity. So from a, I'll say, criticality standpoint and, VFR weather perspective, vicinity showers are on the low end of criticality. Vicinity thunderstorms, VCTS, is a step up. You got to have your eyes peeled for those thunderstorm radar returns. And then TSRA, or thunderstorms rain, that's more significant. That's at the higher end of the bad weather spectrum in this particular report anyway. And then we've got another from weather forecast here. So from 1900 Zulu on the 25th day, we've got a updated forecast. So you kind of get a feel for the way the times flow. You've got your weather report when it's released. Its validity period. And then you got these incremental updates to the weather forecast. 300 Zulu, 900 Zulu, 1500 Zulu. And then, you've got this percentage probability range in here from 15 to 1900 Zulu. And then finally, the forecast says, okay, well, from 1900 Zulu through to the end of the reporting period, I'm expecting this weather right here. So pretty terrible weather, thunderstorms and rain.
So Adam, going way back when to our class about the planning out our flight, are you expected to get the TAF for each airport that you select along your course?
Not each airport, but what you're typically going to do, you're definitely going to get the TAF for your destination airport. And you're going to be briefed. If you do your own briefing, you're going to brief yourself, or if you call into flight service, they're going to give you TAFs based on your, what they call your crossing time. So, and this is why calling flight services actually makes this really easy. When you give flight service your departure time and your expected time en route, they look at the map and they automatically can tell when you're going to be crossing over certain reporting stations, certain TAF reporting stations. So let's say you're flying from Dallas to Mexico City. That roughly probably takes you somewhere in the vicinity of Sugarland. Maybe not, but close enough. And let's say you're going to be crossing Sugarland at like 1400 Zulu. Well, then the briefer is going to say, well, you know what? You know, it's a pretty good chance you're going to be starting to experience this weather right here when you're in and around the Sugarland airport, the 1500 Zulu. But you're not, but to your question, you're not expected to get all of them, because you'll notice that each one along the route is somewhat similar. They change, you know, by region. Make sense?
Yes, and when you, because I haven't purchased it yet, but in ForeFlight, when you put your flight in there, will it just automatically pull that up, and you can, or do you have to scroll through and look at the weather conditions along the on the course?
Let me show you. This is actually a really good time to do a quick demo. So I'm going to.
I've got a follow-up question after we do that. So once we show that, don't jump off it just yet.
No, I won't. I'm actually going to go. I'm going to go to a website here, and I'm going to try to be. I'm going to be quick about this because I want to get to your question, Chris. But I will at some point come back to this website. This is a good website. This is the flight service website. So the same guys that you can call 24/7, 365. They have a website that you can use. I'm telling you, there's information's freaking everywhere. So I'm going to come over here. I'm going to do something real quick. You guys, I'm going to breeze through this. I promise I'll explain this at some point, but I want to get to your question, Chris, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And therefore, I'm just kind of making stuff up here. Okay, let's make sure I have this all filled out. Okay. So, and this is the same on the phone, by the way, but I'm just going to show you a tool that you can use online. So this particular tool will actually automatically, based on your airspeed, your departure time, and your time en route, your planned time en route, give you a feel for your forecast coverage. So let's see here. Okay, here's my TAF, my terminal forecast, right there. So it's actually, see, it's highlighted the crossing times for each of the reporting stations, and it's picked out a bunch of them. It says, hey, Adam, you are going to be crossing the IAH TAF reporting station at this closest reporting time at 4:22 Zulu, and here's the expected weather right here. See how, does that help with your question a little bit? See how that works?
Yeah.
That's really cool.
Yeah, and ForeFlight has a similar function. The person you talk to on the phone, they will do the same thing. They'll say, well, Adam, it looks like based on the TAF, you know, College Station, CLL, is going to be reporting winds out of the north at 5 knots, 6 miles visibility, skies clear. Looks like a beautiful day to fly. Alan, what was your what questions did you have?
So I was reading, I get a couple of newsletters now based upon some of the sites I've landed on. And one of them was talking about a pilot that had flown into a TFR that wasn't shown on an electronic flight bag like ForeFlight. And the question was, what constitutes an official briefing? And one of the things it mentioned is that ForeFlight has the ability to say, you can email me the briefing as proof that you did receive it, because of the regulation saying the pilot has to have all information available about a flight before taking the flight. So I was curious, sort of, does ForeFlight have that email me the briefing capability, and does that constitute a formal briefing? And there was I wouldn't call it it wasn't something as strong as like a ruling, but it was sort of like an observation from the FAA that was written that electronic flight bags aren't necessarily not official, but they aren't necessarily official either. Anyway, you just pulled up something I was curious about.
Yeah. So you guys remember at the very beginning when I talked about legal, I said that calling flight service is the only quote unquote legal form of getting a briefing?
Mm-hmm.
Because that's certainly true. Calling flight service is the only legal method of obtaining your briefing. If you end up in a courtroom over a deviation and they find out that you didn't call flight service or visit their website to obtain a briefing, you better have a really, really good lawyer. Because ForeFlight and the electronic flight bags aren't really recognized as official briefing tools. Now, the way that ForeFlight and other companies have kind of, I would say, become good stewards of the briefing, of the legal definition of a briefing, is by providing you a full briefing. So I'm just gonna like, you see how long this freaking thing is?
Yeah.
So that, I'm sure somewhere in here the TFR, there's a TFR listed somewhere, but they also want to let me know that the runway 16 left declared distance on takeoff run at Fort Worth Alliance Airport is 9,200 feet. There's all sorts of, this is a cover your rear end move by ForeFlight, right?
So you said the only legal briefing is to call flight service. Can you also use the website form you just used? Does that constitute a legal briefing?
It certainly does. Yep.
Okay. And they would, because I see that you logged in, it would track that you entered and reviewed that information. That's right. Yep. That's exactly right. And I can, and I can tell you, so what used to happen back in the day, meaning like, just a couple years ago, is a pilot would bust a TFR and then would tell the FAA, well, it didn't show up on my ForeFlight map. And so what happened was ForeFlight said, okay, well, we're just going to cover our butts here. We're just going to send you the briefing, whether you ask us for it or not. So we're going to cover ourselves from an accountability perspective, but it doesn't mean that the briefing automatically puts it on your map, right? So you've got to either call flight service, that's the legal way, or you can go to tfr.faa.gov. This is another legal way to obtain TFR information. I was there earlier today, actually. Oh yeah, yeah. It's same source data that flight service uses, so it's no different. I mean, go into tfr.gov or go into 1-800 weather brief. Same source data, so no problem there. And yes, ForeFlight and all the other flight bags, they make every attempt to get it on your moving map, but it becomes the pilot's problem if it doesn't, right? Yeah, there were some TFRs issued for Austin and Corpus Christi whenever Trump came to the state of Texas. Yes, and there's one still up over Houston right now. Over Houston, yeah. Make way for military and medical aircraft till Tuesday. Yeah.
I thought they opened up Hobby.
So if you have a flight plan with air traffic control, you're approved. So I can forward you email, Chris. I find it kind of interesting just learning, but it specifies in the temporary flight restriction what the restrictions are and who's allowed to fly. Got it. I'll bring it up here, Adam. It might be worthwhile just kind of briefly talk through or something. Yeah, shoot it over. So there's your TFR right there. There's your Houston TFR. You want to shoot it to me, or do you want to share a screen? I can actually, if you give me just a second, I will send you the email. I already have it up. I'll send it to you as well, Chris, just so you have easy reference.
Thanks.
At the bottom of the email, it'll list what the TFR notes include.
Yeah, TFRs are very important. It's a very important part of the flight briefing because you can get in a lot of trouble for. Hey, there we go. Oh yeah, and AOPA. AOPA is very good at broadcasting these as well.
So to Chris's question, if you scroll down, I think it's the note B or C, maybe D. Yeah, so right there, E, the flight operation is operating under an air traffic control approved flight plan, which a lot of commercial airlines would be doing.
Yeah, something that I didn't necessarily put 2 and 2 together when I was learning how to fly is that TFRs, that air traffic control is extremely tied into TFRs. And I mean, now that you think about it, it totally makes sense, right? FAA, ATC, TFR, it's all the same. So you can typically get approval to fly through a TFR if you file a flight plan ahead of time and make the proper, proper preparations. If an air traffic controller takes you through a TFR, it becomes their problem, FYI. So.
Got it.
All right. So just as our little wrap up on TAF here, there is one other code that I couldn't find as I was searching for TAFs, and that's tempo. Tempo stands for temporary. So when you see a tempo in a report, it means temporarily between these reporting times, 400, 800 Zulu on the 12th day of the month, you will experience this weather forecast.
Is that the one that's like around mountains? Like you get, when it comes over, it creates that rolling weather?
No. I just squiggled that line to like there's gonna be some words there.
Oh.
Yeah, no, that's not. No, I just like insert weather after that.
Okay.
Is what I meant. Yeah.
I flipped an idiot.
Oh,
man. Oops.
No one heard. It's just us three. No one heard it. But yeah. So if you see the words tempo, it just means temporarily you're going to have a certain weather phenomenon, and then after that reporting period, it's going to return to the weather forecast of the valid weather forecast. Okay, so TAF, that's TAF. All that make good sense to you guys? I know the code, the words and the codes, it takes time to pick up, and you have to study them a little bit. But the overall structures, it makes sense to you guys?
Yes. But these are all forecasts, right? And
Okay.
what we see is that forecasts are typically, I mean, sometimes not right. A lot of times not right. So how do you keep up to the current, what's actually going on as I'm flying the airplane?
Good question.
So when you're in the airplane, unless you have really fancy avionics, which you might, I mean, some of the airplanes that you fly are going to have some good stuff. You're typically not going to have access to text-based weather forecasts or current weather, right? So when you're flying the airplane, you've got a couple options. You do have access to flight service. So let's walk through the example. You are going to have access to flight service, and I'm not sure why the map's not working. Let's go over here. You can find flight service frequencies on your sectional. You can also find them in your chart supplement, but let's just go see if we can. I'm going to have to search for one. Let's see. Okay. So, oh, shoot. Okay, it's kind of small, but can you guys see that? The Jacksboro RCO, I'm circling around it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kind of see that? So there's a frequency there, and I wish I could blow it up. Let's see here. So I'm just going to blow it up and bring it over. Bear with me. So you can, while you're flying along, you can plug in 122.4 or 121.5, and that is the Jacksboro flight service station. And you can call up flight service, say, hey, Jacksboro flight service, Cessna November 1234, over DFW Airport en route to Houston, Houston Hobby, request latest weather forecast en route. And they will do the same thing that we kind of walked through before. They're going to pull up that route, and they're going to tell you what the updates to the weather forecast are. You talk to a live human being. And if you're talking to air traffic control on flight following, all you do is request, hey, XYZ controller, I'm switching over to flight service. And they'll say, okay, frequency change approved. Let me know when you're back on my frequency. And you can get your weather updates. That's the easiest way. You talk to a human being, you can get your update that way. Additionally, if air traffic control has the time, they're not obligated to do it. But air traffic control absolutely has weather reporting capability at their fingertips. You can, if you're on flight following, you can ask for a weather forecast update. They may tell you to switch over to flight service if they're busy, but it's worth a shot. They have all that information right at their fingertips.
Okay.
Yep. Now, if you have an iPad with ForeFlight or an electronic flight bag, and you have a receiver, what's called an automatic data surveillance receiver, you can get METAR and TAF and all sorts of weather products right on your iPad. That also is an avenue, but the sure method is definitely calling flight service from the air.
Thanks.
Yeah. All right. So that was TAF. The next forecast tool that we have at our disposal is what's called an area forecast. The acronym for area forecast is FA. And this is like a TAF on steroids, basically. This takes a huge region and gives you kind of a summary forecast. There's only a handful of reporting stations. I have them here on the screen: San Fran, Salt Lake, Chicago, Boston, so on and so forth. And they're updated 3 times a day. And this is usually what the briefer is going to start with. So when you say, I need a briefing, a weather briefing from Dallas to Houston, and the briefer is going to say, oh, well, I'm looking at the area forecast, and looks like it's, VFR conditions for most of the flight, and it's a real high-level type report. Let's go over to an example. Over here on your Aviation Weather Center, I'm going to go to area forecasts. That's where I got the picture. And click on a region, and it's going to spit out the current area forecast. This is a forecast for the entire region, and it breaks the region up into different sections. So you've got your, first of all, you've got your header information, which gives you the time that the report was released and the validity period. You can see valid until, and it uses the same type of formatting as the METAR and the TAF. Valid until the first day of the month at 1300 Zulu. So this is valid until tomorrow at 8 a.m. Texas time. And then it breaks it up into different areas. Of course, you've got this synopsis, remnants of Harvey. But then, let's say I'm interested in northwestern Texas area forecast. So northwestern Texas, zoom that up a little bit. In the Panhandle, skies clear. Outlook VFR. So you can expect pretty nice flying weather in the Panhandle during the reporting period. There's a Southern Plains portion of northwestern Texas. Skies clear. Occasional few clouds from 10,000 to 12,000 feet, ending by 400 Zulu. Outlook VFR. So right off the bat, you can get a pretty nice, high level, call it, 300-mile radius regional view of what the weather's going to look like during the reporting period. Let's see, South Central Texas. I guess that's what Houston would be, would it? Yeah, probably. Where are we at? South Central Texas. Scattered clouds, broken 7,000 to 9,000. Tops 11 to 13,000. Becoming at 22:01 Zulu. So what is that? 5 o'clock or so. Scattered 7,000 to 9,000. After 100 Zulu, skies clear. So, so when you're planning your flights, you're going to use your area forecast to get a general sense of the regional weather. And it's also important to note, this is a test question, by the way, on the written exam. If you're planning a flight to a destination that doesn't have a TAF, you can use the area forecast as a backup. Or, I guess, what I tend to use is I use a TAF that's nearby. But the test question, the correct answer on the test is area forecast, so be careful. All right, I'm doing a quick time check. I'm seeing we have about 10 minutes left. I'll leave it up to you guys. Do you want to continue? Do you want to try to hammer through the rest of it, or would it be more valuable, you think, to review Chris's questions as a group, Alan, just in case you might have the same questions?
Yeah, let's definitely review the questions. I think I'm gonna have a little bit more time because the folks that were supposed to be here at 8 aren't here yet. So.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Why don't we? Hey, Chris, why don't we hammer through some questions real quick?
Okay, it shouldn't take too long. I was, after the air traffic control session and listening to that one, you talked about sometimes there'll be times where air traffic control will ask you to go to a different holding pattern. And it made sense on the PowerPoint, but I was just thinking, okay, I'm in the plane. How do I know where the next holding pattern is? Will it be, like, will they give you the... I just don't, like, it's easy as a driver because you got a road, but in the air you don't. So I was just trying to understand that and wrap my head around that.
Yeah. So
yeah, that was the example where the comms had been lost, right? Yeah,
exactly. That was like, I'm thinking to myself, man, I got to find a good example it was for light gun signals, right? Getting a light gun signal from the tower. And it was like, I got to come up with a good example. And obviously I think I caused a little confusion. So I'm sorry about that, but here's two holding patterns. And this is just one application. There's probably others, but this is one that came into my head first. So I've got, and here's my airport. I've got my airport down here with my runways. Light gun signals are used with air traffic control when there's a lost communications, typically with lost communications. Either the pilot has lost communications, meaning he can't communicate with other people, or the tower has lost communications and they can't communicate with anybody. And so in the example where the tower has lost communications, what they'll typically do is they'll set up holding patterns and they'll sequence aircraft in with light gun signals. And so I gave the example where you've got holding pattern 1 and holding pattern 2. This would generally only happen if you had a pretty busy airport where you needed to separate traffic pretty aggressively. So holding pattern 1, your approach controller, who's got jurisdiction over airplanes coming in and out of terminal areas, is going to be sequencing aircraft in a holding pattern. Maybe you've got an airplane here, airplane here, and so on and so forth, right? And I gave the example where one by one, the approach controller is going to clear an aircraft, one aircraft at a time, to the next holding pattern, holding pattern 2. And that holding pattern is going to have one airplane in it at all times, only one airplane. And they are going to receive a light gun signal from the tower when it's time to land, when you're cleared to land, right? And the light gun signals have different definitions that I had on the charts, right? If it's a green light, you're cleared to land. If it's flashing green, you're cleared to. They have different definitions. If you remember that chart.
Mm-hmm.
So in this scenario, you've got, and I apologize. I think it was probably a more difficult example than it needed to be, but you've got approach control dictating when airplanes leave the holding pattern, the holding pattern number 1, for holding pattern number 2. They will instruct you to switch frequencies over to tower frequency, who's in the tower, right? But that tower frequency is not working. So what do? They use light gun signals. You're now in holding pattern number 2, doing your holding pattern, going around in circles, and you see a green light gun signal. Well, that is an indication that you can leave that holding pattern and proceed to land. After that, the approach controller is going to instruct airplane number 2 to leave holding pattern number 1, right? And enter the next holding pattern number 2, for the same sequence, right? For that cleared to land light gun signal sequence.
And will the approach controller give you a heading so you know where that second pattern is?
Yeah.
I'm just like, how do I physically find that pattern?
Yeah. So it's always so your holding patterns are always going to be associated with a fix in space. I'll say 9 times out of 10, 75% of the time, it's going to be a VOR, right? So you're going to have your VOR station at one corner of the holding pattern, and then the holding pattern is defined off of that VOR. So your approach controller is going to say, Cessna November 1, 2, 3, 4, proceed direct to, Houston VOR, and hold south of the VOR right-hand turns.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah, that was definitely a advanced topic, and I tried to use it to explain light gun signals, and I really apologize for that.
No, it's helpful. I was more confused as to, I just want to know where I'm supposed to be going.
Yeah. No, that's cool. What usually happens, and the reason I kind of tried to come up with that example, what usually happens is, someone says, well, when you see a green light from the tower, it means like you're cleared to land. And then the question that always comes up is, well, what do you mean by that? When am I going to see the green light? What the hell are you talking about? You know what I mean? Uh-huh. Like I'm flying around. Am I just going to see a green light?
Yeah. And my only other question was, I didn't really understand, and I would like you to elaborate on squawk codes. What is a squawk code?
Yeah. So squawk codes is a discrete code. I'm going to pull up a picture really quick. Squawk codes is a discrete code that air traffic control is going to assign to you over the radio. And you're going to plug that into your transponder. The transponder is a device in the cockpit that receives and transmits information to the controller's radar. And so when you plug that in, so for instance, let's see here. This particular transponder has the squawk code 1234 plugged in. And so that means that on the air traffic controller's radar screen, he's going to see your radar return, your little symbol, and it's going to have a 1234 underneath of it, so that he knows who he's talking to. He knows that it's you on the screen.
Okay.
Makes sense. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It'll help once I've actually gotten into a plane.
Airplane, yeah. So
Yeah.
you're flying along, and you say, okay, Houston approach, November 1, 2, 3, 4, at 6,000 feet, 2 miles west of the Houston Hobby Airport. Request flight following. So you're requesting. You want radar You want radar services from the approach controller. And the first thing he's going to say is Cessna November 1234 Roger, squawk 1234. And the reason he does that is because he's got a whole bunch of like radar returns, a whole bunch of little aircraft symbols on his radar screen. He wants to verify which one you are. And so you respond squawk 1234. And you plug in the 1234 on your little transponder device in the cockpit. Here's another example of a transponder. You punch in 1234, and all of a sudden on his screen pops up your radar return, and and underneath the little symbol says 1234. So he can positively identify who you are on his radar screen.
Okay.
Yep. Good question. And was there another one?
Nope.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
All right. We've got 8 o'clock. Alan, we still clear? You still by yourself?
No, but I've pushed my availability to 8:10.
Okay. Chris, are you good to go for 10 more minutes? Chris, are you good to go for 10 more minutes?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool. I'll go 10 more minutes then. All right, and this will definitely take a good 10 minutes to cover. So another forecast at our fingertips. You know, we've got our TAF, we've got our area forecast, which we just went over. The next one that we have at our fingertips is called the Winds Aloft Forecast, and its acronym is FB. And it's exactly as it sounds. It is winds, and it's temperatures at altitude. The report that you get, the text report, is several different altitudes usually in 3,000 foot increments, updated twice daily, and it's oriented to true north, which is kind of frustrating because, you know, then you got to do a conversion. But the report is oriented in true north. And here's a sample report at the BHM reporting station. I think that's Birmingham Airport. So you've got your reporting station to the left. And then you've got your altitude reporting increments up here, 3,000 feet, 6,000, 9,000, 12, so on, so forth, all the way up to 39, flight level 390, 39,000 feet. And the formatting of the winds aloft forecast will drive you absolutely nuts. But once you get used to it, it's not too bad. This will absolutely be one type of reporting tool that you use your electronic flight bag for, because it does all the conversions for you, and you know, you don't even have to read the text report. But you'll be expected to know the text report, so you have to learn it. So it very simply is the first two numbers on the first of all, we've got the wind and the temperature. And the first two numbers of the wind are the direction, and the second two numbers are the velocity. So for instance, 020 at 13 knots. That's the wind forecast at 3,000 feet. At 6,000 feet, 070 wind direction, so wind out of the east-northeast, at 12 knots. And then at 6,000 feet, we've got a forecast of 18 degrees Celsius. The temperature forecast is missing from the 3,000 foot forecast, because you have to have, I think it's at least I think it's like 1,500 feet or 2,000 feet actual ground clearance to get a temperature forecast. And all of these altitude readouts are in sea level. So it's very likely that we're at a location where the airport elevation is somewhere near 3,000 feet, Birmingham. I don't know what Birmingham's elevation is, but it's probably like 500 feet or 1,000 feet. So very simply, you've got your wind direction, first two digits, wind speed, and then temperature. So for example, at the 18,000 foot mark, you've got wind out of 310 at 10 knots and a -6 degree temperature forecast. Okay. And then there's this funky little conversion you have to do, because as you might imagine, the text version of this tool only has so many digits it can represent. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I guess it's 6 digits. So there's definitely instances when you're going to need more digits, like when the wind speed is over 100 knots. So here's the conversion you have to do. If you have a, if the, I'll say the formatting can't support the actual forecast condition. So if your winds are greater than 99 knots, but less than 200 knots, you have to add 50 to the direction. And you have to subtract 100 from the speed. So, so I've got an example down here. And this is just one reason why this report kind of stinks, and why you're probably going to be using your ForeFlight or some other tool to give you wind information. But for example, you've got 731960. Imagine that's like up here somewhere, up on your 34,000 forecast. Well, we're going to subtract 50 from the direction. We're going to add 100 to the speed. And our temperature is assumed negative in the 6-digit data group. So 230. Take 73, subtract 50, so we've got a 23. Take our 19 and add 100, and we've got 119 and -60.
So is your clue that you need to do this the fact that the direction is not plausible in a 360-degree compass?
Yes, okay. That's exactly right, yep. Yeah, and sometimes it's not that, right? Sometimes it is. Sometimes the direction is possible, but the speed's not. So, you know, you'll see there's another example. I probably should have put this on the screen. There's another example where it starts with an 8. And you know what? I should have included that example. Let me make myself a note. I'll email that example out. Where you have to use similar formula, but it's for if the speed's over 99 knots, but the compass heading's doable. So from I'll say, not to say that you only want to prepare for the written test, or you only want to know this stuff for passing the flight test, but yeah, you'll have to know how to read the text version of this report. You're going to want to know how to do an example of a conversion. But in your actual flying, I'd be surprised if you actually stumble across and use one of these reports. I mean, if you end up subscribing to ForeFlight, the Winds Aloft tool in ForeFlight is basically foolproof. You don't have to know the conversions, you don't have to know the directions, but you will have to know how to use it on the written test and whatnot. So I just took a note. I'll send out a second example of a conversion for you guys that I probably should have included on the chart. All right, that's Winds Aloft. Questions on that? Other questions?
No, those practice till it.
Yeah, all this stuff is practice. I'm thinking about this. It's probably got to be like data overload, but a lot of this just takes practice. You know, you can start. I mean, the best thing to start doing is as you start doing your flights, as you start getting into your flight training, make it a habit of coming to the Aviation Weather Center. I'll send out a couple of these links, and just start getting familiar with the tools, you know. Look up the METARs, check out the TAF, right? Stuff like that. Start getting familiar with some of the tools. You can get the text version of the winds. You got this fancy little graphical tool up here, but you can, if you absolutely want to, get the text version. Come down here and click on the region, and you'll get it. You know, there's Houston. Yeah, here's Houston Hobby. So, you know, you can use the text version if you want, but you know, you'll become good at it, and then you'll start to use the tools that make more sense to use because they're easier to use and they're less prone to mistakes, if you will, right? So yeah, I'll send out a couple of these links. I'll send out the Aviation Weather Center link. You guys can start practicing. We didn't get through all the material tonight, so I'm gonna tack on the rest of the material to the next session. I think the next session we're gonna talk about some private pilot regulations and some of the different federal aviation regulations that you're gonna want to become familiar with. So that stuff's kind of dry material, so we'll spruce it up with some of this weather stuff. If that's cool with you guys.
Yeah. Well, you do me a favor, if you think the next session might be long, just let me know and I can plan accordingly. That way I don't have to artificially end everybody's night.
Oh, no. To be honest with you guys, I put this material together and I jump to and from some of these real examples. And so that's probably what extends it out. You know, I'm jumping over to these websites and showing real life examples and stuff, and I'm not sticking to the PowerPoint. So it's not a big deal.
I think it's hugely, I think I guess my question phrased a different way is if the material lends itself in your mind to questions and real life examples, just give me a heads up. And I'm like, all right, I will not book in my night and we'll just let it rip.
Right on. Yeah. And also, you know, if you know, worst case scenario, if like we end the 14 course session and we still have like an hour of stuff to review, we'll just find time to do it. You know what I mean?
Right on. Cool.
All right. Any questions before we wrap up on the weather material that we got through?
I'm good. I'm in acronym overload right now.
It is nuts. Oh, it is nuts. What I'll try to do is, because I'll be honest with you guys, I might be the only weather nerd, but I'm sure you guys will become weather nerds. I freaking look at METARs like I don't even watch the news anymore. If I want to know what the weather is, I'm looking at the METAR. So
I'll shoot a lot of crap that way.
Oh yeah. So I'll shoot. I'll just make it a habit this week. Every morning when I wake up, I'll get on to Slack and I'll shoot out the METAR and we'll talk weather.
Yeah. And we're meeting again on Sunday, right?
I believe so. Yeah, I think so. I haven't looked at. Yeah, I think so.
Okay, cool. Yeah, as an update, I have not had my first flight yet for obvious reasons.
Yeah, I didn't think you guys would be doing much flying down there. As much as I'm sure you guys are itching to get in the airplane.
Yeah, I've had to cancel 3 lessons so far. I keep rescheduling optimistically. I thought I was going to be all set for Saturday morning, and then the TFR came out. That's valid till next Tuesday. And I was like, damn it.
Wow.
Oh, well.
Man, that's
I'm
crazy.
all set to go on the following Saturday. So
okay, well, hopefully it wraps up. I know I know the TFR is it's a non-negotiable. You know, everybody's grounded.
Oh, yeah. I mean, there are far bigger fish to fry right now, and I do feel mildly selfish for wanting to get in the plane, but I'm also planning to do a lot of volunteering. So
sure. I just got a text that my airplane is being used right now to fly supplies down to Houston. I was like, holy crap, that's so cool.
That is super cool.
I know. I was like, that's nuts. I feel bad that I'm not in it, you know?
Go for it. Hey, this weekend, man. If you need to fly supplies down, you need a place to stay. You know, you've always got a place here.
Okay, cool, man. Cool. Hey, Chris, do you think you'll shop the same flight school that Alan's at, the one at Sugarland?
Yeah, probably.
Okay. I got to say, I was impressed. I mean, I know I'm only looking at a website, but the fleet there looks legit. And if the instructors are good, I'd say it's a thumbs up. I think it's a good one.
Chris, if you are someone considering them, let me know. I know more now. I can jump on the phone with you and tell you what all I've learned.
Oh yeah, that would be awesome. It's not a flight club though, right?
No, not that I can tell.
Oh,
Yeah, it's not. I mean, if you guys do decide to join a flying club later on down the road, I mean, all that is paying an initiation fee, filling out an application, and taking a check ride. It's not a huge deal.
so it's not there's no synergy if you actually learn how to fly there.
I mean, it's fun, right? I like being a part of the flying club crowd. There's a lot of students in flying clubs that you can, and there tends to be a various instructors. And the one thing that flying clubs I think differentiate themselves over schools is just the fact that you can take longer trips. You don't have to have the plane back in the same day. You can get out and do overnights, and so I guarantee if you learn at a flight school, once you get your ticket, you'll join a flying club. It's just there's a lot more flexibility. But for the purposes of learning, I mean, flight schools, they do have some advantages over flying clubs. The biggest is plane availability. I mean, a flight school is a flight school. It's not, the planes are not made to be taken out on overnight trips. So you know that the plane's going to be available on the day that you want to fly.
Got it. Alan, whenever you have free time, just give me a call.
Yeah, you got it. I'll even walk you through my decision process, why I went with them versus a club.
Cool.
Man, this is like super exciting for me to watch this take place. I can't wait to hear about the flying.
You should see what I have sitting on my desk and why I'm so anxious to get in a plane.
What is it? A headset?
It is a headset.
Oh, look at you. What did you get?
I'll give you one guess.
Oh, it's probably Bose.
Yep.
Oh, look at you. Man, you're fancier than I am. I need to get on the Bose train, man.
Well, dude, so here's what I'll tell you. PayPal is doing a 9-month, no interest credit on that. So you can just get $100 a month and you're not paying a single penny of interest. So I'm like, that's a no-brainer. That's free money.
PayPal?
PayPal credit. Bose lets you do it while you check out.
This is nuts.
It was super easy. And
this is dangerous, man.
When I did mine, I got a $200 free Bose Bluetooth speaker with it.
All right.
How much is it?
They're $1,000.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what though. I'll be straight up with you guys. You don't. Okay, yeah, it is a nice to have. I get it, but talking on the radio, I don't want to scare you guys or anything, but it happens to be one of the more difficult things to do, right? Having something with noise canceling where it just sounds like a freaking dream in your ears will make it so much easier. I really wish I had it when I was learning to fly. And, given the fact that learning to fly is expensive anyway, you could just, it makes the air traffic control thing probably so much less nerve-wracking, because in my headset, I've got an old school pair of Sigtronics. It's like half the time I'm like, oh, say again. What'd you say? I can't hear you. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I have excellent hearing, but I struggle when there's background noise or things aren't real clear to derive words. Like I've been in sound booths as recently as a year ago, and I just scored off the charts. But once there's that extra noise in there, I struggle to discern everything. So I knew the noise cancellation would help me kind of just get a better sense of it, because I've been listening to air traffic control and live ATC on like headphones, and there are definitely times where I struggle to hear things. I'm like, okay, if I'm going to learn this, I need to not add another variable of challenge.
Yeah. When I got my private, I didn't even my instructor. He was an old World War II pilot. He wouldn't even let me use headset. I had to use the speakers in the cabin of the airplane. That's
hardcore.
Oh my.
Hey, yeah, that guy had hearing aids and everything. I'm like, oh my God.
Confidence booster.
Man, I can't wait to hear about it, guys. Let me know how that goes. If for some reason, probably not before this Sunday, obviously, but if for some reason you guys end up going flying before, you gotta let me know how it goes. This is so exciting.
Yeah, well, I know for a fact that the Anson Aviation School is not taking anyone up before Tuesday.
Oh no, they definitely not. Yeah, definitely not.
But I'll definitely be. I have 2 lessons next Saturday.
Yeah.
So
wow, two in a row, huh?
I'm doing one in the morning and one in the afternoon.
Okay, all right. Same instructor?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's the other reason why I'm doing this, because I can book the plane, I can book the instructor up to 3 weeks in advance, and they have the FAA flight simulators that you can actually apply based upon whether you're doing Part 141 or Part 61.
Okay.
Towards your hours, and they're cheaper than the planes.
See, that's another reason I like flight schools, is because more and more these days they're starting to pick up the simulators. I think, what's the one brand? I think it's called Redbird or something like that.
That's the one they have. They have 3, I think 3 Redbirds.
So in the past, it was kind of like, hey, if you're going to learn on a simulator, then you're not going to become a good pilot. But the reality of it is, I mean, the cost savings is huge. And so if you can actually book time, and yeah, you don't use it to learn things like takeoffs and landings necessarily, because that's a feel thing, right? But absolutely to learn like procedures and talking to air traffic control and learning how the instruments work. And hell, when you get your instrument rating, if you guys go for your instrument, I mean, you could do all that in a simulator. That's all procedural.
Yeah, and that's one of the things one of the guys I talked to, Pat, he said that his instructor put him in all kinds of crazy situations for his IFR training, and it really let him learn to get a feel for the instruments before getting in a plane and doing, like, he'd already had his private license for a while, but he's like, that really helped me get used to the instruments before I was having to worry about actually the feel of the plane, or in a scarier situation, I was safe in a simulator.
Yeah, no, for sure. No, that sounds like a legit school. I'm thinking that's a good one. And of course, when I can get down there to visit, I was actually thinking about this today. When I can get down there to visit, we all need to do some flying,
I'm counting on it. I'm actually going to be in Dallas in September. I'm thinking about trying to stay through the weekend and bouncing over and seeing if you want to go up.
Hey, let's give me the date so I can book the plane.
Yeah, I'll shoot those over to you.
Yeah, and then as far as flying, I coming down there and flying your flight school aircraft, I don't know. I'm sure I'd have to go up with an instructor and get checked out first. But maybe if one of you guys is going for like a training flight, maybe I could just sit in the back seat, that kind of thing. It's like, hey, it's my ground instructor. He's going to come with me.
That'd be awesome.
I'll ask.
Cool.
All right, guys. Oh, I just got the door knocked.
Yep. Hey, there you go. You guys enjoy your evening. Hey, what's up, Sarah?
Let's go, Buckeyes. Let him go so we can come watch the game.
Boo.
Oh, come on. I got enough boo this week. That's the last thing I need.
I know. I'm sorry. I'm going to watch the game right now. Of course I am.
As you should.
Wow. This is all being recorded.
You can cut this part out. I could send you some video editing.
Oh, man. You guys are funny. All right. See you, Chris. See you, Alan.
All right. Bye, guys.
Bye, Chris. I'll give you a shout out about the school, Chris.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.